with us here today. And panelists, you all have incredibly rich background. You're incredibly accomplished folks. So I'm bound to not do justice to that. So apologies ahead of time. We have Dr. Roli Mathur, who heads the Indian Council of Medical Researchers Bioethics Unit and who is the director of the WHO Collaborating Center for Bioethics. She is part of several international committees around ethics and technologies. These include WHO groups, groups anchored at Harvard and other international organizations. Most recently, she led an important effort laying out ethics guidelines for applications of AI in medicine and health in India at ICMR. So thank you, Dr. Roli, for joining us. Next, we have with us Dr. I hope I say this correctly, to be very honest. I'm going to say Dr. Urs Gasser or Gasser. I don't know how I should pronounce you. Please help me out. So Dr. Gasser is the Professor of Public Policy, Governance and Innovative Technology at Technical University Munich. Also an incredibly accomplished researcher in this area. Previously, he was the Executive Director of the Berkman Klein Center for Intent and Society at Harvard. Prior to that, he was at Harvard Law School, and among other places, he advises OECD as well as UNICEF. Welcome, Dr. Gasser. Then we have Professor Juergen Hesser at the University of Heidelberg, University Medicine Mannheim. He is deep into data analysis and modeling in medicine, really at the cutting edge, using these in areas such as mathematics, computer engineering, computer science, and computer engineering, computer science, and physics. He also is a member of faculty of, he's also co-opted member of faculty for physics and astronomy and an adjunct member of Interdisciplinary Center for Scientific Computing, IWR. Welcome, Dr. Hesser. It would be great if I could get a quick confirmation from all panelists and perhaps a quick hello on the mic here so that we are able to hear you.
Thank you.
Can you? Yeah. So, Dr. Roli, maybe you'll need to get closer to the mic or speak a little louder, perhaps. Dr. Gasser?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the kind introduction.
Yeah. And Dr. Hesser?
Thanks for the introduction and looking forward.
Wonderful. So let me set this up very briefly. So the AI headlines once more swing between hype and fear. Meanwhile, sitting at the intersection of ecosystems here in India, Art Park AI and Robotics Technology Park is a nonprofit that sits at the intersection of government and development organizations, the industry and startup ecosystem, and the research and academia. Now, what's clear is while all this hype is going on, fundamentally the nature of research seems to be changing at every university. Certainly so I observe here in my backyard at the Indian Institute of Science. Now, what does this mean for researchers in the research universities? What does it mean for the kind of skills they need to bring to the table? What does it mean for the ethics conversation around this research? And what does it mean for government and regulatory organizations that have the unenviable task of shepherding this incredible waves, right? So what I would like to do is I would perhaps first start with our panelists and give them each, perhaps 3 to 4 minutes of your time with some opening remarks, and we'll jump right in from there. Does that sound good? I'll start with Dr. Roli Mathur of ICMR.
Thank you, Dr. Raghu, for setting the stage for all of us to deliberate upon. So, since my interest primarily lies in the area of ethics, and I feel that the use of the technology to the best of mankind is possible or is more useful when the ethical elements are built into the way we tackle society. So, as we all know that this is a very, very promising technology and with a huge potential in the area of healthcare and for the mankind to reap the benefits out of it. And especially for a country like India, where we have a diverse group of people, diversity not in terms of socio-economic, but cultural diversity, regional diversity. And we have seen lack of facilities of certain types, lack of infrastructure. The costs can be huge. There are remote areas which are inaccessible. There are populations which are marginalized. So there are different requirements, and we feel that artificial intelligence can really help to scale up a lot of the efforts that are being made in the area of providing better healthcare services, outbreak predictions, drug discovery, surveillance of public health requirements. And but then there's a fear. There's a fear about, because any new technology comes with its own set of difficult questions, and there are questions about can this be misused? How can this personal information be used? Who owns this data? With whom it can be shared? Is it usable? What kind of trust breach is possible? What kind of confidentiality issues may be there? And then because some of these AI-based tools are offering solutions for healthcare. So can these solutions, who is to be held responsible? Who is going to be accountable or liable in case of any wrong decision making? Or, in order to assign who is going to deploy and who's going to be responsible for it. And when we look at our regulatory as well as ethical framework, we are really not sure whether we have a complete framework that can safeguard the right safety of human beings and can ensure rightful delivery methods. So last year, it wasn't last year, it started a few years ago that we started some discussion at ICMR about what are the ethical principles. Are there any additional principles? We already have a national guidelines. Are we talking of something additional? What is it that is additional about artificial intelligence? What should innovators be thinking about? What should developers be thinking about? How should the public be informed? How should funding agencies respond to this? So there are a lot of questions. There were more questions than answers. And so a guideline was developed, which was released last year. And we are very sure that it's going to be a very dynamic tool because we still don't know all the issues, and it's quite based on a lot of theoretical experiences or listening to what is happening around the globe. So this needs to be implemented well by the right stakeholders, and the feedback needs to come back to us at ICMR so that we can look into the issues and see whether these guidelines are able to provide some kind of framework for adopting AI-based solutions for biomedical health research or for healthcare delivery. So it is basically targeting all kind of stakeholders involved in healthcare business, such as creators, developers, technicians, researchers, clinicians, ethics committee members, institutions, sponsors, and others. And I think I would end there, and I would like to hear from others also as to what. So I just urge that you can visit ICMR website or just Google in the AI ethical issues. It's called Ethical Guidelines for, this is the document, Ethical Guidelines for Application of AI in Biomedical Research and Healthcare. Thank you very much. If you want hard copies, you can write to us, yes. Soft copies are available on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roli Mathur. Certainly, it's been heartening to see uh, premier leading agencies in India, especially ICMR, try to, if not get ahead of the curve, stay with the curve, right? That's a challenging one, and you put it very rightly. We really don't know, right? We are still learning, so we need to remain dynamic, continue to learn from what's happening. With that, let me turn to Dr. Gasser, and please also help, especially our Indian audience here, with your name's pronunciation, and then would love to hear your initial comments.
Thank you so much. Actually, the pronunciation of my name is just perfect the way you did. So I'm following up, right, what Dr. Mathur said and reporting about the similar effort aimed at creating principles located in the US this time. So I've been part of a group of experts convened by the US National Academies of Sciences that brought together academics, industry representatives, and government officials to explore the rising challenges posed by the use of AI in research and chart a path forward for the scientific community. The focus of this effort was on generative AI, a very powerful, most recent innovation in AI that's now used in research, and I hope you'll hear more about it, for problem solving, for data analysis, for interpretation of text and visuals, but also for content generation, the production of text, images, and data. So it's a powerful tool. I would also echo the sentiment. We don't know exactly yet what's the responsible use. There are lots of unknown unknowns. There are, of course, also great opportunities as well as challenges. Now, some of the challenges that this expert group has focused on and discussed is, well, how can we ensure that the research community, but also the public at large, understands and can confirm the veracity of generated content? How can we maintain accurate attribution of what is produced either by machines or humans? How can we ensure levels of transparency and disclosure of the use of AI in producing research results and text and the like? How can we enable the replication of studies and analysis? And also, of course, how do we identify and mitigate biases as well as inequalities that may be introduced by AI algorithms and training data as these tools are adopted by researchers? So a long list of problems, some of them, of course, familiar from many other discussions about the use of AI in society across sectors. What this group has been doing, and I think where we try to make a contribution, is really to zoom in on what is the role of scientists, what are some sort of good practices that we would propose for scientists who adopt generative AI in their work, whether it's in the natural sciences or the social sciences or any other branch of sciences. And so the group came up with 5 principles, and I will just briefly touch upon them, that were put forward actually in a recent editorial in the Proceedings of the National Academies of Sciences, PNAS. Happy to share the link to the publication. And so the 5 proposed principles are: first, transparent disclosure and attribution. So scientists, the group argues, should clearly disclose the use of AI, of generative AI in research, and accurately attribute whether the human or the AI was the source of information and ideas. The second principle is around verification of AI-generated content and analysis. So basically clarifying and doubling down that the scientists have the ultimate responsibility and obligation to remain accountable for the accuracy of data, images, or interface inferences that are drawn from using generative models. The third principle is about documentation of AI-generated data. So the group proposes that scientists should mark AI-generated or synthetic data. so that we can avoid the confusion, what are observations collected in the real world and what are observations or quasi-observations derived from AI-generated content. A fourth element is, or principle is, a focus on ethics and equity, so that the scientists, of course also the model creators, but I'm focusing here on the role of scientists, should take necessary steps that the use of AI produces scientifically sound results that are socially beneficial, and take action to mitigate the risk and of harm. So a very broad principle, of course. The challenge is operationalization, but I think a very important principle that goes to the core of what the ethics of a scientist is. And then the last principle, again, also echoing what the first panelist said, we need continuous monitoring, oversight, as well as public engagement. So we acknowledge that this is early stage. We need to both continue to watch and shape and guide the use of generative AI to the benefit of science and the people, but we also need to respond quickly to possible risks and challenges. And so in conclusion, what the expert group proposes is a new strategic council to guide AI in science. So there's a concrete proposal out there how this may look like in the US. And I think that may be an interesting proposal also for India to figure out whether there may be a mechanism, a strategic council of sort anchored in the National Academies of Sciences to play this role of a monitoring body, but also facilitator of the many conversations we still need to have. So I stop there and turn it back over to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Gasser. That was very succinctly summarized. Certainly, we'll have some follow-up questions on that as we dig into the topic more. But it's great to see efforts which try to lay out what's the expected behavior of our scientific community, right? And a lot of it is going to come, I mean, we can write as many laws as possible, but ultimately it's going to, culture always comes from actual behavior, right? So here's hoping that, our scientific community, which is basically our family, all of us are part of that, hoping that we can uphold those principles. Now let me turn this over to Dr. Hesser.
Many thanks. Before I start with my statement, let me first clarify a little bit what we talk about when you talk about AI. AI is a little bit more than what we see with deep learning or machine learning. Yeah, AI has a history of 70 years. Yeah, and only the last few centuries, 2 or 3 centuries, we have the machine learning really popping up. And that's what we talked about all the time. Yeah, so AI is a much bigger field, and what we talk about machine learning is essentially, just to make it from the technical point of view, we describe the data by a parameterized model, period. Yeah. So we don't invent something with the model. The model only describes what we have seen, nothing more. Yeah. Everything else is actually not happening. So what's the implication? Why do we have now this machine learning popping up? Why is AI so fancy at the moment? The reason is that the last 20 years, we had seen that machine learning, in case we have a lot of data, and this is the key point, why all the ethical implications come up. When we have a lot of data, that the deep learning is able to model this data very well. And I just remember when there was this discussion how well machine learning can identify or classify images. Yeah, we had this 5% level of humans identifying the right classification label to images. Yeah, and this was broken because the machine learning tools learned millions of data sets, which we cannot do, by the way. Yeah, we can only see maybe a few thousand, and that's it. Yeah, but they trained a lot. Yeah, so data is the key. Why this was that successful, and then we had a couple of fancy models which came up. Yeah, and this now allows to learn from data models. this transforms the science everywhere. So, I mean, you see that a lot in medicine, but see that in mathematics, in computer science, in other disciplines as well, as long as we have data which can be described by these models. This is the key concept. Without any data, we're lost, right? So this is where machine learning comes in. And this transforms a lot. But this is not trivial. I mean, I see many colleagues working on machine learning models, yeah, but they don't really understand what they do. Unfortunately, this is a risk, yeah. That's what we're doing is data science at the basic, yeah. Data science is not only machine learning. Data science is where we get the data, how we get the quality, how we impute missing information until the very end where machine learning comes into play. 90% of the work is not machine learning, it's just to curate data to bring it to a state that we can use it. And with wrong data, I say always trash in, trash out. Yeah, we cannot learn anything. We have to have the right data. Yeah? So machine learning does not work without data, and it does not work without good data. So that's a very important point. And this is something which has to be understood from all disciplines and from all those who are using machine learning, because machine learning can only be as good as data is behind. Yeah? But the other, so it's influences. So if you say researchers, universities, yeah, skills, all that has to come together and to better understand what is really the concept behind and how is it correctly used. The challenge or the risk is essentially what we see with, we have a lot of laws, data protection laws, we have the laws of the AI Act in Europe, we have the laws of medical product regulations, yeah. This all narrows down what we can actually do, yeah, and we have to be taking that with care. I mean, if you narrow it down too much, then at the end, I have to say we cannot do anything, yeah. So let's give an example. If I think about 20 years ago, we could just develop a new technology and insert it in a hospital for better treatment. That was possible with the current, with that time, the medical device regulation, that was possible. Now, about 6 years ago, we had the new medical device regulation. Consequence is university cannot do that. It's too many regulations. Small companies left the market because they cannot cope with these regulations. Yeah? And the more you regulate, the more you narrow it down, the less will happen. So that's a certain risk. We have the difficulties, we have the risks, yeah, and we have to bring it with a very specific conceptual way how to regulate it, not to over-regulate it, but also to keep the risk under control. And this is a very delicate thing. So it's not easy to do that, yeah. But with one law, you don't really fit everything. This is the problem, what we face. And we have a lot of paperwork, and we often stop research because we cannot cope with the paperwork. Yeah? This is a risk we face from the bottom-up perspective, yeah. And yes, that's an open question how to tackle this. And by this here, I want just to raise the relevance of both perspectives of research on one hand side and the risk coming in.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hesser. I think you kind of set up my first question to the panel almost perfectly, right? Because you talked about the fact that many researchers are using ML, right? Which I mean, if I were to paraphrase that, they have data, a lot of data, hopefully of some kind. They are getting hold of some ML algorithm, right? And they perhaps are throwing that algorithm at the data to see if there's something that it'll surface up, right? So my first question is to all of you. Actually, there's two parts to the question, and I'll go around the table here, so to say, the virtual table. The question is, perhaps you can give us an example from your space, from especially research areas, not what you would typically think of computer science researchers who may be using machine learning in a non-obvious space, and also touch upon the kind of skills this sort of ubiquitous use of ML means. And actually, I'll turn right back to Dr. Hesser for initial continuation of some of his thoughts in this, because you touched on it. But let's say, I know, I mean, recently I was at a mechanical engineering event at Indian Institute of Science, and I was basically looking at some event where I mainly was looking at summaries of various dissertations, and it seemed like perhaps out of 10, maybe 7 had some element of ML as part of or maybe the predominant part of their thesis. And I really scratched my head and said, well, this is, I mean, yes, there's mechanical engineering here, but seems like the predominant theme is actually machine learning, right? So back to you, and then I'll go to Dr. Roli Mathur and then Dr. Gasser.
Yeah, I guess the key point, and you addressed the point. Yeah, I mean, what is the quality of the results? How can we really use it, and how can we rely on it? Yeah? And this means that we need some sort of an education element for the researchers, yeah, and for the students, so to say, as a part of the study to learn how to do that correctly. It's not just I take a code and run it and take some data and get some result, yeah, but you have to know data quality, relevance of data, identification, is that really causal relationship, things like this, yeah. This is very important. And without this understanding, you know, we generate a lot of piles of papers which are not worth to be published, yeah? Because if you replicate that, you would say, no, that cannot work. Yeah? And that's I see quite often. And the reason is often the lack of understanding what they do. So we need an education element as a basis, and only on that basis we can really improve the science, my opinion.
So what you're suggesting is, doesn't matter what discipline you may be getting into right now as a researcher, sounds like there's foundational understanding of data science, right? And the principles underpinning proper usage of machine learning, and understanding what is valid, invalid data, and what are valid and invalid outputs. How do you ferret out causal connections as opposed to just correlations, so on and so forth. Great. So now, Dr. Roli, you have the unenviable position of, or enviable, depending on how you look at it, of kind of seeing the swath of research that is happening in India in medicine, right?
That's right.
And it must be scary, right? So your thoughts on the same topic. What are you seeing, and maybe evolve this question. So Dr. Hesser mentioned what kind of skills they need. What are you observing in terms of these skill sets? Are these skill sets there? How big is the gap? What can we do about these skill sets? Especially medicine is such a critical aspect. And you mentioned in your opening comments that especially in places like India, we are looking to AI and ML to bridge that skills and traditional infrastructure gap, right? So yeah, your comments on what you're seeing in terms of the skill sets and or lack thereof among the researchers, and what we can do about it.
Thank you very much. And like very rightly pointed out by you and Dr. Hesser, there is a boom of AI-based, people are really star-eyed about its consequences and what we can do about it. So my worry has been about, because data from humans is being treated in a very mechanical manner, it's just an entity, and the value of the humans and the sanctity of that data, or ensuring whether it is robust, because the way our data is collected, which is not really being done. For example, in hospitals, when data is being collected, it is being collected for a purpose, for clinical medicine. Now, if the same data is extracted, we are not very sure about the quality of that data, because it was not originally planned to to be ready for machine learning tools. So, but it's been seen as a very quick and easy solution, and often it is sort of a disjointed approach because, as you see, this is a highly technological, advanced, kind of work of a different type, where computational skills and digital and other knowledge is required. And on the other hand, we have medicine, and medical doctors are busy with their patients, and they would hardly have any time to really bring out that understanding which is needed for making sure our data is good for analysis. And this is not research. So we are not sure about the rights of the humans and whether their data can be just anonymized and used, shared across borders, shared on portals, can it be placed on cloud? So there are a lot of questions about those aspects. Now, the big problem is about how do you marry these two skill sets? Who are these people who understand both sides, the needs and requirements on both sides, and put them together for developing approaches, and who monitors them, who takes care that this is being done the way it is, who has that skill set? Even the regulatory systems do not have that kind of knowledge right now to tackle those. Who monitors whether the safeguards have been in place, whether the data has been taken, or whether it is the right amount of data, or is it a small data set, or how big the data set should be to bring out a particular tool that is being developed? So these kind of things, at the moment, what I see is this is a commercial enterprise where there are company interests, there are market bodies who are pushing for this. And it is not so much being done in an academic setting as it should have been probably. And there is a small, I would say, limited understanding. So I really agree with Dr. Hesser that we need a particular type of training set to train our budding students and scholars who are interested, and for the the engineering side to understand a little bit of the medical aspects, because there are set rules. When we are dealing with humans and their data, there are set guidelines and requirements and regulations. But unfortunately, it's all under Ministry of Health. And now we are talking of different ministries of IT and electronics and engineering, which who are not, so India being a large country and having everything, but implementation mechanisms and communication channels are still not working the way they should be. So I think we need to work more, talk more, and probably plan some training programs where we integrate the sciences and bring them all on board to understand all the approaches and the rightful methodology forward. So I think that would be one of the things that we should be doing. Thanks. Yeah. Hand it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. Now I'll go to Dr. Gasser. You laid out 5 principles. Do you think the research committee broadly just will get them, or do you think we need to somehow make it as part of training? Would love to hear your thoughts on that, right? I mean, I don't know. I know doctors have to take the Hippocratic oath, but it's one thing to take the oath. It's another thing to really understand what it means, right? And here, there's so much nuance, right? This human accountability, right? Where does that begin and where does that end? Seems like a non-trivial undertaking, right? So over to you, Dr. Gasser, for thoughts on, again, just the skills gap and the training just within the research community about ML and its appropriate usage.
Thank you very much for the question, and I tried to build up on the comments of my co-panelists. I think you're absolutely right. We have a fairly significant challenge in front of us, and it's kind of a dual challenge, as my co-panelists pointed out. I think for decades, when we were talking about technologies and skills, we were mostly focusing on what skills do we need to develop innovative technologies, right? So how can we create the pipeline of scientists and technicians who can help to build and leapfrog with technology? But I think with AI, something is changing, and maybe it started already with digital technologies before that, which is to say we're no longer only focused on the development part, but we are increasingly now recognizing that we also need reskilling and upskilling when it comes to the use of technology. And I think that's a seismic shift for which we're not quite prepared yet. Because we're talking about larger populations, much larger numbers of people we need to reach. It's one thing to train the engineers at the technical university like TUM here in Munich, but it's another thing if 40 to 60% of all jobs of everyone is affected in one way or another by AI and requires at least some baseline understanding what the technology is about, what its promises and where the limits are. And so I think you're totally right that yes, it's helpful to put forward principles that then may be adopted by scientists, that may be administrated by the scientific community and learned societies. But that's definitely not enough. We need to do much more. And I think ultimately the answer is we have to rethink our educational system from the beginning. I would say from the primary schools upwards, and not only teach responsible use of technology, but really practice it in all ways. So I think it's one of the big challenges of our time. If I may just add one example area that also links maybe the conversation to India, when you asked about interesting use cases, I've been actually deeply impressed by a recent conversation about a month ago in New Delhi with the Indian Supreme Court and the Supreme Court of Singapore, discussing how AI can be used to enhance access to justice. And so that's, I think, an area where you see exactly the shift that I'm alluding to, which is to say, yes, there is the question of responsible development of AI, but now you see these tools being adopted in many parts of society, including the judicial system in India, with very good intentions and with a lot of potential. But then again, what does it mean in terms of skills and knowledge and competencies that individual judges and court administrators need to have? And again, that just illustrates the point that my previous panelists made, that we need a far-reaching and systematic effort how we approach the skill challenge. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gasser. You touched on this area of AI being used in perhaps in a non-obvious space. Do other panelists have examples of this? Just to get the curiosity of our audience going, can you share an example of AI or Gen AI being used in a space that perhaps we do not usually think of? I can see the gears in your head going, you're churning. Right? I can, Dr. Roli, any thoughts? I was recently surprised by, I was listening to this podcast. I forget the name of the researcher at University of Washington. And one point she made was, it used to be that we had interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary teams. And she was especially referring to team members who know data science and AI, team members who know biological sciences, and team members who know the clinical medicine, right? Now she's saying increasingly we need team members who get all three of these, right? And she was saying when we talk about explainability in a typical AI model, a lot of it is about saying, hey, which factors are probably most relevant in producing a certain prediction. So often the way it's done is you remove certain variable and see what's the differential impact of removing a certain input, right? And you say, this did or did not have. So it's a counterfactual way of checking what is really leading to certain outputs. And she said, this is not good enough in medicine, because you may have, just because you know that XYZ genes are there in the pathway, you do not actually know how they are interacting. And she basically said, well, just machine learning engineers will not be able to solve the problem of explainability in this case. You need folks who really understand the biological pathways in a deep way for them to build useful enough machine learning models. And this to me was, this perhaps I understood always, but put in this way, suddenly it made both the relevance of ML as well as insufficiency. It's a necessary but insufficient uh, toolkit, it sounded like, in this particular space of understanding drugs and pathways. I don't know if you have any other examples, just opening it up a little bit here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Raghu. And I was thinking a little tangentially on when I heard Professor Gasser talk and give the example of judiciary. See, all the time when we give examples, it will be from the biomedical and health research or clinical health care, where a lot of tools are being developed and for medical diagnostics or screening programs or reproductive health care, communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, and so on and so forth. But I'm just thinking, and I really do not have an answer to that, is that whether we are looking at a different standard for AI ML use when it comes to human health, or are we taking at other uses of AIML, which are in other areas such as judiciary or maybe, any other area basically, which is not impacting human being or human health as such. So, because we work in a disjointed manner, again, I would say, because being under the Ministry of Health, our focus has been around health. But then AI is to be used in so many other spheres which would impact human beings, but not in the way the health impact is. So do we think that we need to treat it the same way? Or do we need to think about a higher standard when it comes to human health care or human health related research? Because in our country, we do have laws which are pertaining to human beings, biomedical research, clinical trials. Are they to be taken in way of clinical trials? It's a new device that is going to be used on human beings. So is it under the definition of a clinical trial or a device? So I think there is a lot more discussion needed, and it would be good to hear the thoughts of how it is being handled in Germany. Actually,
can step in. This is a good
start.
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay, for Hemmer, everything looks like a nail, right? So, if you say AI, then you can say everything I can tackle, I can just put the name AI on top of it and then make it. So, I'm not so much astonished that everybody's using this tool, yeah? But what is often forgotten is AI is not a mechanical instrument, so to say, which you switch on and switch off. Period. Yeah. The paradigm shift is AI is mimicking our process of thinking and reflecting on the stimulus of the environment, so to say. Yeah. So that's not a mechanical tool. That's a digital tool which is mimicking the process of learning and understanding by some limitations, as we say. Yeah. So taking this perspective, yeah, it's a little bit, for me, it's also astonishing that why we should think the human and AI as separate entities. AI is a tool. AI is a tool which should interact with the human. So we call it human-centered AI, which brings both together, because There's some papers out, they say, well, a good radiologist can classify much better, better than AI, has a better insight, whatever is the number of data sets, a good radiologist can beat the AI. Well, perhaps simply because the AI is trained on radiologists' opinions, simply, yeah? So they cannot really be better. But on the other hand side, you can ask whether the joint decision of a human and AI might improve. So this is called learning to defer. Yeah, both sides are just coming up with a decision. Yeah, and this is an unusual perspective on AI. So it's not the extra tool, switch it on and get result, period. Yeah, but it's something where there's an interaction, a dynamics, which leads to better decisions, which make it objective instead of subjective. Now, if you mention a physician in India, but it's in Germany the same, yeah, they're completely filled up with work, yeah, often paperwork, yeah, but they have no time to look for good data. Yes, but if they take a tool that might help doing this, but just translating things which are unstructured into structured information, which can later be used for machine learning tools. So this is a different perspective how this could be considered.
So Dr. Gasser, you have your hand up. Thank you, Dr. Hesser. And I'll say that probably in a minute, we should really go to audience questions.
Just briefly, thank you, Dr. Hesser. I absolutely agree that it's really this interplay between humans and machines, and we think about the promises to think about it more holistically. I just wanted to add, however, that this is not a trivial task. I'm very impressed. Just to give a simple example, last year, the US authorities issued an advisory circular that stated that pilots in cockpits have over-relied on autopilots and that they forgot how to fly airplanes. I'm simplifying a bit, but it says pretty much that. And cockpit automation is a great place where we, of course, know about the benefits of adding machines to humans and organize the interplay in a smart way. But we've had about 100 years of experience in a very controlled environment with a clear regulatory structure, with lots of investment and lots of expertise to figure out the best interplay between the two. And we haven't. And so on a cautionary note, as much as I agree with what you're saying, I think the big challenge ahead is, okay, what safeguards do we put in place? How do we create cultures of learning? And how do we deal with actually the costs of learning as we figure out how this integrated approach really looks like in practice, even compared to the airline industry, right? We're now rolling out these tools without the benefit of having controlled environments and all the infrastructures in place. So while I totally agree with what you're saying, I think the challenges are still big to some sort of turn it into a benefit and managing risk appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asad. I'm going to pick up some couple of questions from the chat here. First question is AI tool like ChatGPT helpful in medical or healthcare field? Dr. Mathur, this question has your name written on it as the medical expert here. Your thoughts on, perhaps you want to more broadly generalize the question, not so much to ChatGPT, which is a chat interface, but the role of potential generative AI or a GPT-4o like large language model. How might it be helpful? Is it useful in medicine or healthcare?
Well,
and again, just to keep it, I'm going to force all our panelists to keep it generally brief, because I'm trying to get a few questions in before we wrap up here in another 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, definitely there is a lot of scope, and but I would come back to ethics, and that is that how do we make sure that there is equitable access to people who need it? How do we make sure that the right people get the right kind of technology that should be helpful? So when we build these tools together, we must also think about the implications and also about building public trust and acceptability. And when we talk about medicine, we are talking about supervised AI also, that there has to be a human interface to take a final call. There are tools to help us, but then the tools should not be the ones who may take the decisions. Thanks. That's a quick one.
Got it. There was another question about, is AI useful for climate change or and for financial recession predictions? Seem like very, very broad questions. Of course, they can be useful. Folks are using it. I'm going to say that with AI, especially, we have this double edge. As we do more AI, we are burning more carbon, quite literally, right? So there's a very interesting dilemma with AI and climate change, besides, of course, using AI itself to predict weather. So let me go to a slightly different question here, which is, in view of the implementation of the AI Act in Europe, what efforts are being made by Indo-German government agencies for a common framework? Are you aware of any collaborative efforts, especially in the area of medical informatics, which requires transfer of patient medical data between EU and India? I'm not sure if anyone can touch on any sort of collaborative efforts underway. I myself am not directly cognizant of efforts, but I do know that there are active collaborations that are underway broadly in the research community, and often those requires special mechanisms and ethics committee approvals on both sides for us to be able to usually exchange data in that way. It's not a given, but over to any panelists if you want to chime in. Okay, all right. So final question. I'll kind of leave you with this thought of over-regulation versus not regulating. There's the AI Act in Europe. There is the DPDP Act in India, and US, of course, is forging its own path. It seems like. Any final thoughts on how we do this, especially for research, and especially since researchers value the freedom to follow their, their individual curiosity, right? Ultimately, that's what drives. So would turn it back to the panelists for final comments, starting with Dr. Hesser.
I raised the point with our regulation, and we need regulation. The problem is what we face is a lot of paperwork. Yeah, I mean, I would not care about so much over the regulation if the paperwork would be limited. If we take ChatGPT writing us the paperwork, that would be fine. I would like to see that. Yeah.
So you'd like to see some AI help us get through the AI regulation. That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
But actually, the point is essentially we cannot use templates because each case, at least in Germany, is considered as an individual case. So we have to justify for which data, why this data, what don't less data, what is the data management plan, and so on. Yeah. So there's always, we're starting from the beginning and always discuss it from the beginning to the end, what to do. And this is a lot of work, yeah, which prohibits us to do research. Yeah? I mean, it would help a lot to have regulations. We have standardized templates. We can use that. If we stick to this here, we have not to care too much about that here, because as long as we're in a certain frame, yeah, this already settled. That would help us a lot with this whole paperwork and would just simplify the research at the end. This is something I would like to see.
Got it. Yeah. Dr. Gasser, your sort of wish or thoughts, final thoughts.
I mean, this is such a tricky question. I'm also worried that we are overshooting when it comes to AI regulation here in Europe with the EU AI Act. I know I'm not making myself popular by saying that, but I think there is a real risk that we create a regime that hinders innovation in a particular way. and that we run the risk that we don't unlock the full potential of AI as we need it, confronted with very big societal challenges. So this may work for Europe, but I would caution against copy and pasting the EU AI Act in other parts of the world, where circumstances may be very different than infrastructures and capacities. So I think at this moment in time, it's worthwhile to look at different approaches to AI regulation. I mentioned Singapore as one example, and I linked to an article I recently wrote that surveys some of these different approaches. And maybe depending on the stage of development of the ecosystem, it's advisable not to go full into the direction of the AI Act here in Europe for the reasons that were just mentioned by Dr. Hesser. Thank you.
Got it, Dr. Gasser. Dr. Roli Mathur, you have the final word.
Thank you so much, Dr. Raghu. I think this has been a very good learning session. So from the Indian perspective, I see that there are so many acts which are, we don't have a direct act on AI, ML, but we do have a number of regulations or rules and policies that have parts of it have addressed these issues. So I would just like to mention a few so that listeners are aware of them. So one is, of course, the Information Technology Act. Then there's Personal Data Protection Act. Then there's a National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence. There is AI for All, initiative by Niti Aayog. Then we have the National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy, Biological Data Storage Access and Sharing Policy. Then we have a task force which had been set up, and we have NEHA portal, EHR standards, and then of course our Drugs and Cosmetics Act and device rules, which also deal with these AI tools under the regulatory ambit. So there is a lot there on too much paperwork, like rightly pointed out by Dr. Hesser. And we need to, I think, come together, and I think we are in this stage, and as we evolve, and then we would probably have a direct some kind of a rule or something. But we do have our guidelines in place, the ICMR guidelines to presently guide. We should not over-regulate right now because we don't know how the technology can be used for the benefit of mankind. So thank you very much. I think that I that.
Thank you, Dr. Roli. And I will also mention one more effort of ICMR, which fortunately Art Park is actually a collaborator. There's an effort called MIDAS, or Medical Imaging Information Datasets, which is essentially try and create a national system for high quality datasets for both research as well as validations. So there's an effort underway that way. With that, thank you, DWIH, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you to all my panelists. We close with that. Of course, you can reach out to all of us these days. You can find anyone on LinkedIn and reach out with any questions, follow-up discussions. Welcome.
Thank you so much, all of you. That was a wonderful session. I bet everybody learned a lot. We will also send a couple of links to all the participants later after the event gets over. We've noted down the links that you've posted in the chat. Thanks a lot to all the participants, all the speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking your time. For the attendees, one word, please do not leave the event as of yet. We actually have up to 20 institutions lined up for you who from you can get first-hand information about funding opportunities, research positions, jobs, get to know portfolios of these institutions. You will find them in the interactive sessions link. You can go there, and I've just posted the link, so everyone who's registered on the portal, you can find more information there. This happens 2 times today with different institutions. And then if you want to know how are the funding strategies of the key institutions from India and Germany, such as the DAED, the DFG, the DST, and the Indo-German Science and Technology Center, we have another panel lined up at 5 p.m. India time. So we hope to see you there, and thank you so much from me, and have a good rest day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.